All right, hey everybody, it is Greg here with Dustin and Brad, and you are watching the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. We go live every single Thursday night, 7:30 p.m. If you care to join us live, or of course you can always listen after wherever you like to download your favorite podcast, or you can check us out on YouTube and follow us at awakentheprotector.ca. It is there in the bottom right-hand corner. Matter of fact, if you go YouTube, it is Awaken the Protector Within. And you can look us up there and you will find us there. So anyways, listen, tonight we're going to have an excellent podcast. We're going to go deep on some really cool training methodology. I'm going to give you a framework. And this is episode number 53, and I've called this one Doom on You, Preparing for Violence of Action. So we're going to go deep on the Doom on You mindset, how to train it, how to obtain it, why it is so important, violence, so that I can protect myself and my family from violent criminal assault, and how for the past 30 years, I've been helping good people just like you do the same. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right, guys. Okay, listen, I call this one the Doom on You mindset, or just Doom on You, the mind-body connection when you need to prepare for violence of action. So let me just cover a couple of things, right? Because normally we would have a whole bunch of stuff that would have preceded this. It would be the setup to us diving into this topic when we do our Weaponized 16 intensive personal training programs with brand new people. So I'm going to create an entry point to this so that everybody can understand what we're talking about, even if you have no experience in this. So bear with me just for a couple seconds. But the Doom on You mindset, I'm going to set this up because I always look at it two ways, right? Evil people. The thing that we have to worry about when it comes to talking about violent criminal assault is that they think evil. This is the mind is the most powerful weapon that a human being possesses, and its capacity to think evil. Okay. Now we could give example after example. 30 years in this industry, dealing with people that have been the victims, dealing with the family who have lost people to horrific acts of violence. The details are gruesome. We're talking violence. We're talking when it is reasonable for us to believe we're facing imminent grievous bodily harm or death. So understanding that these sadistic fucks out there that don't give a fuck about anybody. They're willing to murder, they're willing to rape, they're willing to destroy. They don't give a shit. Okay? They don't care about society's rules, they don't care about your moral code, they don't care about any of that stuff. These guys think evil. They have twisted fucking thoughts. Their brains and their thoughts and their perceptions, and therefore their actions are foreign to most people. Okay? So they think evil. The counter side of that, weaponizing, is it's the mental and physical process for how you prepare to face somebody like that. And if they have this think evil mindset, this sadistic, willing to do anything, don't give a fuck mindset, you have to have and develop the counter mindset to that, which I call the Doom on You mindset. Okay, so someone's coming for my family like that, someone's coming for fucking me, my kids, other innocent people when I'm there. When someone that fucking evil appears, they thinking evil, I have the Doom on You fucking mindset. Yeah, well, I understand you. Fucking doom on you. Doom on your fucking plans to destroy. Doom on your fucking plans to murder. Okay, so that's where this Doom on You mindset title kind of came from. How do we prepare for violence of action? So the second part to that is there's three elements, right? Speed, surprise, and violence of action. Those are fundamental pillars in the weaponizing process for how do you take an average person, and of course, air quotes, average person. What's an average person? But I mean someone that, listen, they're not professional fighters. They're not spending 7 days a week, 5 hours a day in the gym. They're not competing at a semi-pro or professional level. These are just good, hard working fucking people, right? They got a job, they got a family, they got kids, they're living life. They don't have all this time to dedicate to training, but they take the responsibility to protect themselves and their family very fucking seriously. There are people, right, that believe it is the fucking responsibility of government or the police to protect them. So they're like, I don't have to fucking worry about this system. We have a legal system. We have police officers. We have laws and rules. All right, well, look back to the beginning. These motherfuckers, violent criminals, there's an element of them. They don't give a fuck about that. Okay, so they take it seriously. So we're dealing with people that have very limited or maybe no fucking experience. The guys that we train are over the age of 30, between 30 to 60. We have guys that are even older than that, but between the ages of 30 and 60, they have families. Like I said, life is fucking busy. They're providers, but they also know that they need to be a protector for their family. So The doom on you mindset. You need speed, surprise, and violence of action. You can't fight these fuckers straight up. You do not want to get engaged in a man-to-man, mano-a-mano, fucking fight with violent criminals, because they're not going to fucking fight fair. Okay? There's not going to be a fucking thing about it that's fair. They're not looking for a fight. They're looking for a victim. Okay? So they are going to fucking overwhelm you. They're going to overpower you. They're going to outnumber you. They're going to try to out-equip you, meaning bring better and more weapons than you do. And they're going to try to out-position, which means they're going to catch you on the blind side in a fucking ambush. Those are the 5 elements, right? So all of this is important for you to understand because, as I say, listen, we have to develop a doom on you mindset. And how do you actually prepare for violence of action? Well, there is a mind-body connection, a training methodology that you have to understand. Now, again, normally we go into great detail on this. We break this down. We viscerally impart this. We use classical and operant conditioning during our weaponized 16 intensive personal training programs. We do this over the weeks as we build it out. But I want to give everybody a framework because if anybody's out there, if you listen to this, if you follow along with us tonight, by the end of this, you will understand there's things you can do at home right fucking now that will help build a much stronger connection, which will allow you to turn on the violence of action and embody that doom on you mindset. Okay, so that's the goal of tonight. So let's kick it off. So here's the thing, and I'm gonna give you a story of why I decided to do this for tonight. A few days ago, I was working. Everything we do in our training is private, right? So it's myself and our team, our coaches, one-on-one, right? Again, if you have somebody that doesn't have a lot of time, they don't have a lot of experience, they may as well be working and drinking direct from the source, meaning that they get our energy, our knowledge. It's all 100% focused on them. It's a safe environment. They're not getting hurt. They can get up and go to work the next day and all this shit, but they're actually learning real skills, mindset, mental toughness, all of it. So the other day, I was working with a guy. And we were going through some of the aspects, working some of the strategies. And as we were doing it, we were drilling it back and forth. He was drilling it, I was drilling, I was showing him, I was modeling, he was modeling what I was doing. And of course, I was just visually doing what we do. And during this thing, he brought attention to the fact of how I was breathing. And he's like, oh, I find that very interesting, you know what I mean? Because, I read this study on breathing, or we this and this, we did this stuff. And he gave me this kind of anecdotal story about breathing. And he said, and you're just doing it naturally. And I was like, whoa, hang on, time out, hit the brakes. There is nothing that we are doing in training. There's not one part of what I'm doing in training that was natural. It's natural to me now because I have conditioned it. So yeah, I don't think about what I'm doing. It is natural now, but nothing what we do. The weaponizing process is all by design. If you got somebody that has no skill, we all start with no skill. We don't know what the fuck we're doing. So as we all start with no skill, what has to happen is you have to be trained. It's a process. And you train physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. You have to, it's integrated whole person development. And all of those elements have to come together synergistically. So as we're driving into the point here of the doom and you mindset, I said, listen, my breathing is anything but accidental. And as a matter of fact, and he's kind of like, well, okay, well, what do you mean? Can you break that down for me? You can't start at breathing. You can't start at how I was breathing. You actually have to back up. And so what we back up to is we divide things into a couple sections. And one of the things is we teach a strategy, a tactic, or tool, and then we start talking about the fuel. What is the fuel that drives the strategy, the tactic, or the tool? So you can have this phenomenal fucking race car, right? High performance, everything on it, decked out to the nines, but it's got to have the right octane fuel. Okay, so when we're talking strategy, tactics, and tools, what do I mean when I'm talking about fuel? And I'm going to let you guys jump in on this, and feel free to add in any comments overall on the doom on you mindset or preparing for it if you want, or we'll just stay focused on what I'm talking about now, which is when we talk about fuel, how do you guys see it? It's not one-dimensional, is it? So what do you guys know about the fuel side of it? You got your mute on there, Brad. We can't hear you. But I'm sure what you said was super insightful.
Mine was on mute too.
They're both on mute. They're like, this guy's talking a lot. I'm just going to mute up here.
Okay, well, like you said, it's multidimensional.
Sorry. Sorry, guys. I'm having
We're still
some
in the
technical
broadcast,
difficulties.
but it's all black.
Yeah, give me a second. It hit the wrong button here, and it dropped you guys out, and I just have to add you back in, and there we go. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Brad. We're gonna get this sooner or later here, guys. I swear to God. Okay, go ahead.
So in terms of fuel, there's one of the things that comes to my mind is like what's fueling the strategy. There could be something in terms of like even emotional fuel, right? Um, Fuel that it's like, well, what's driving us? What are we connected to? That is even on an overall bigger picture of like, what are we doing this for? What are we protecting ourselves for? So that's just one thing. Like that could be things like I'm the protector of my family. I'm the protector of my life to right, liberty, freedom, and security. So having that emotional fuel could drive our actions and our strategies.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so there's the emotional fuel, understanding what your why is. That shit starts before. Why do I, again, I said that the people that come to us, right, they're providers. They work their fucking ass off every day, provide for their family, build a good life for their family, all that kind of stuff. But they understand that they need to protect it because nobody's gonna, that's the number one thing for anything, right? Security first. You can amass whatever you want and someone just come fucking take it away from you. So you have to be able to provide security. So they want to be this. So what is your why? Why are you doing this? That is a fuel in and of itself that helps start to build this doom on you mindset. Excellent, very good. Dustin, anything you want to throw in on fuel right away?
Yeah, no, actually, my brain went to the exact same place, and I think it's just because it is such a big important part of why we do what we do and how we became who we are. It is so much because of our why behind what we do. You know, we often talk about it's not because of what's in front of you, it's because of what's behind you. And that's one of my favorite concepts. We've said it on here a bunch of times, and it's worth saying again because I think people understand it right away. I think anytime people question like why we do this, why we're so into this, is because they're thinking like, well, they're thinking too much about what could potentially be in front of them, and it's like it has so little to do with that. It's so much about what's behind you, which is really what Brad just said.
Yeah.
You know, it's your kids, it's your spouse, and maybe it's just other human beings. Maybe, you know, it's just people in your society, you know what I mean, that you want to help keep
Innocent
safe.
people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So the why is huge. It's not what's in front of us. It's not the threat that we're obsessed with and worried about. It's the people that we love and want to protect and understanding it's our responsibility. That's the fuel. Okay. Now, one of the things as we dive into this, right, is let's make this simple. Let's break this down. If we're gonna have a doom on you mindset and we're talking about fuel that fuels us, well, we have to talk physical. And most people's brain would go to the physical. And I don't know if a lot of people have heard this or know this or believe this, but here's the thing. There's two ways that you're gonna lose a violent encounter. The first one is you fucking run out of gas. You get too fucking tired to continue to defend yourself. Now you got mass attack, they got guns, bats, whatever. You're taking on injury, you're sustaining damage, you're fucking moving, you're running, you're fighting, you're wrestling, you're doing all this shit, and you run out of fucking gas. Okay, the best conditioned athlete in the world can run out of gas in a violent situation where he's outgunned and outmanned and being blitzed by multiple opponents with weapons, all this shit. So you have to take in and develop a system for how do I regulate my fuel? A, how do I condition myself? Because that is important. And then more importantly too is, well, how do I regulate this? How am I going to spend my energy? And not just physical energy, but mental energy, emotional energy, because that's linked into your fortitude. Go ahead.
I was just say on that same note, I think where people get confused about what you're talking about is they're solely focused on like the physical conditioning. And like, oh well, I'm a runner, I run marathons, I run up mountains, I run stairs, I swim, I do all this shit stuff, I jump on the rower for 3 hours, and like I'm just conditionally a specimen. It's like that's great, but none of that's done under SNS.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like that sympathetic nervous system, the physiology, like that's a whole different kind of conditioning. And like you're about to get into, I think if you can't regulate that, you don't even understand what a gas tank is. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly. What Dustin's saying in layman's terms is combat stress. When you're in there, the combat stress, the body's physiology, it's a whole different fucking world. And you have to, if you've never been exposed to it, then it is impossible for you to have inoculated against it. And you do not have to wait until you get into a violent assault to go, well, here's my exposure, now I can inoculate it, and I will very quickly on the fly, while my life and the life of my family is hanging in the balance, I will learn how to regulate this. And that doesn't really work that way. You get what I mean? Like your best bet is to have the right training, which introduces the right stimulus at the right time in the right way, and it teaches you it gives you and imparts you. We call it an inner control box, like having a thermostat in your house. You go, oh, this guy's bragging about his fucking furnace, and oh, look at my furnace. This furnace costs so much money. Look at this, look at this. And then when he realizes, and everybody's leaving, and he's sitting there at night, and it drops down to minus 35, and they forgot to put in a thermostat. So the fucking furnace is useless. It doesn't fucking work because there's no control box for it, right? To activate and unleash all that power. You have to develop an inner control box. So you can have the best strategies, tactics, and tools and just be the best specimen and all this shit. But if you can't regulate, you're going to fail. Okay? So the physical conditioning becomes a massive part of it. So that's way number one. You lose a violent encounter because you run out of gas. Most likely you're going to run out of gas because you don't know how to regulate. So you're spending energy like a fucking madman in the wrong places, wrong areas. None of it's tactical, none of it's strategical, and you're just going to you're going to gas the fuck out. Okay? The second way is line familiarization. Somebody fights you in a way that you're unfamiliar with. So you got good gas, you got good stamina, you're fucking regulating, but all of a sudden somebody does something to you and you're like, what the fuck is this? You got no blueprint for what they're doing. Okay, so back in the day, the biggest thing that people have seen now is back in the day, no one understood the fucking ground. UFC comes along, Gracie's come along, and they show the entire world, listen, you guys don't know what the fuck you're doing on the ground. So if we get you on the ground, the second we take you down, which is not as hard as what you think it's going to be, despite all your, knock them out with one for this, they take you to the ground and you're like, I don't know what the fuck to do. So the guy sits on you, try to push him. You know, the Gracies are famous for their first lesson when you do Gracie combatives is they sit on top of you and say, okay, try to push me off. And people are on the bottom, big, strong guys, and they don't know how to fucking get anybody off. So it's fucking easy to sit up there. So line familiarization, you're going to lose that situation. So those are the two ways you lose a violent encounter. Okay, so that's part of our fuel. You don't regulate, you don't understand how to regulate, you're burning fuel. Someone fights you from a line that you are unfamiliar with, you do not have a blueprint, you are going to burn your fuel. And you will lose that situation. Okay? Now, the next step of this is what Brad had already said, and we talked about the why, and Dustin echoed it. There is mental and emotional fuel. See, I said that this is I called this doom on you, preparing for violence of action. Well, here's number one. You have to understand the mind-body connection. Okay, and our saying is very simple. The mind must always precede the body. The mind must always precede the body. In training, in combat, in any crisis, the mind must precede the body. The mental is to the physical as 4 is to 1. The mental is to the physical as 4 is to 1. It is that much more important to make sure the mind is trained, weaponized, sharp, because it is a trained mind guiding a trained body. Okay, so when we talk about fuel, the physical, we need to have the right type of conditioning. How do we condition our body? That's all super important, obviously. The better shape you are, the easier it helps. It matters. Okay, then there's the line familiarization, though. Developing the blueprints. And I'll tell you I have seen guys that have been mediocre in their conditioning, their physical conditioning. They are not specimens. They're mediocre in their physical conditioning, but their domain knowledge, their reference point, their depth of understanding and experience when it comes to the blueprints of how violent criminals assault is so fucking deep. And I've seen these types of individuals absolutely fucking destroy and fuck up violent criminals. And yet to look at them, you'd be like, listen, this guy's not a fucking specimen. No, he's not. But he understood what the fuck they wanted. Think about it this way. If you've read a book before, or you've watched a movie before, it is infinitely easier to not jump at the scary scenes. It is infinitely easier, you know what I mean, to narrate to other people or to control. And you get what I mean? Like you can alter things. You're prepared for things. And that's kind of, I mean, a weak analogy, but that's kind of the analogy with this. So those two things, I think people get how we do this. So I said this doom on you mindset. The doom on you mindset starts by us, when you're training, we show you the right type of conditioning for a violent situation. It is different than training and having the conditioning for a ring sport or a combative sport like Thai boxing, judo, jiu-jitsu, anything like that. Now, those guys are some phenomenal athletes. So if you had their level of conditioning by doing what they're doing, that's great. The inner control box that we build for how to regulate your energy under the stress of a life and death, violent assault, being outgunned, outmanned, you know what I mean? Like that combat stress, the sympathetic nervous system activation and mobilizing all of the body's resources and, you know, the shape of your fucking eye is changing and vasoconstriction and auditory exclusion and slow time motion or fast time motion and all these different things that are happening inside your body. You have to have a very specific thermostat built for that furnace. for that to regulate that system in the most efficient way possible. So that makes sense to most people. So we condition and train people on that. Now, the bigger connection that I want, as we're working strategies, tactics, and tools, we are getting to physical conditioning, we're learning to regulate, but then there comes this second part, the deeper part of the conversation. This is what really unlocks this doom on you mindset, which will allow you to access violence of action. And that is the mental and emotional part of it. And I'm going to do this as I'm going to ask you guys the questions, and you'll just, because again, we don't pre-rehearse this. You guys don't know what we're going to talk about. I like showcasing the fact that, like, this is, when I say this is how we train, this is how everybody gets trained. This is how you guys got trained. This is how we train everybody, because it fucking works. So while we're doing strategies, tactics, and tools, we're getting to physical conditioning. We're teaching them the line familiarization, the blueprints of violence, how these fuckers operate, what realms you're going to need, what ranges, all that type of stuff. Okay? When we're doing that, the mental and emotional part comes out. And so we do that, and we do that with the kind of the fuel part of it. And the first thing is that the emotional system gets hit. If you think you're teaching anybody how to defend themselves and you don't take into consideration that in that moment they are feeling something emotional, the emotional system gets hit first. So one of the big things we do is we get people to identify the emotions. People are horrible at speaking in terms of emotions. You ask somebody, hey man, how's it going? How you feeling today? How you doing? And they're like, oh, I'm good, I'm great, I'm okay. Those are not emotions. So all of a sudden you got somebody in front of them who's threatening their children or threatening their lives, threatening to kill them, and there's these emotions inside of them. And most people will go, yeah, I'm good at emotions, it's fucking anger, that's what I'd be feeling. Okay, great, that is an emotion. But is anger the right fuel? Remember my analogy of like a funny car, a jet car. You got to have the right fuel or that thing won't fucking run. And if it runs, it won't perform well. So you can have this anger. You could have this, you could become indignant or whatever you want. Whatever the emotion is, you could become, you could be overwhelmed with fear or uncertainty or apprehension or whatever it is. You're going to have an emotional response to this. So in the condition, you got to understand that's fuel. But is it the right type of fuel? So the first thing that we do, and ask you guys, what's the first thing we do when we get them to start identifying and thinking, okay, in this situation, as we're training with them or we're feeding them, we're doing it, what are you feeling? Don't just execute the strategy, tactics, and tools. Don't just rely on your conditioning. Don't just rely on your ability to regulate or your line familiarization. You're feeling something in that moment. So what's the first thing we do when we get them to identify their feeling? What do we help them do? And it's a big process. There's different angles, so you can come at it from whatever way you want.
Well, I think you said exactly that, is that the first thing that they have to do is they identify what fucking emotion is popping up. Because is it anger? Is it fear? Like you kind of rattled off a bunch. And it's like the first step is like, because we always say control follows awareness. So it's like we need to identify exactly what emotion bubbles up. What emotion are you feeling? In order to be able to process it with the right outcome, so to speak.
Okay, so that's the part I want to hit on. What do we mean by the right outcome? Why are we directing it? How do we direct it? How do we know we're getting, like, what is the right outcome?
Because that's the regulation. That's regulating our response, right? So like if we can't, like you said, with the thermostat, it's like if you can't regulate that furnace is useless. If we can't regulate that emotion and process that as opposed to stuff that emotion, then we're no good, right? We have to be able to process that emotion to get through that, right?
Okay, so if I have an emotion and I have fear, of course there'd be probably a mix of emotions. I'm feeling some fear, I'm feeling some uncertainty, I'm feeling, let's just stick to two of them, but I'm feeling uncertainty and I'm feeling, let's do three actually. I'm uncertainty, I'm feeling fear, and I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling three of these emotions are all happening inside of me. Of course, I have to be able to recognize that. Now, here's the thing. How do I recognize what I am probably going to be feeling in these types of situations? Like when there's a threat directed towards me or my family, how do I know what I'm going to be feeling? Right? Don't I have to wait for the threat to figure out what I would be feeling in that situation?
You need to experience it in a controlled manner, controlled environment.
Yes.
Again, it's like if there's, if you're trying to figure out the temperature of the pool, what do? You put your toe in it, right? You don't just cannonball into the deep end and hope for the best.
Yep.
right? So it's the same kind of concept, right?
Yeah. And so here's the thing, right? And this is an interesting concept. People operate on a relatively narrow emotional plane. And here's what people know. Does anyone know anybody that is often quick to anger? Does anybody know somebody that is often quick to feel sad or quick to feel small or humiliated or disrespected or any of the other emotions that I can list? We all know people where we can, with a fairly high degree of accuracy, predict their emotional responses to certain things. Why? Because we've fucking seen it. If you know them at all, you've seen it. Anyone ever been out and see a stranger at a restaurant and you see them behave in a certain manner? It's an emotional reaction to a situation. You don't even have to know all the details, and you can look at that fucker and go, that's a chronic motherfucker. That's the type of motherfucker that walks around every fucking day with that fucking stupid sourpuss, that's him. That's how he is emotionally shitting all over the world. That's how he operates. That's his mindset. Like, you fucking can see it. For all of us, we have our comfort zones. And remember, your comfort zone doesn't mean it serves you. It doesn't mean it's the best of you, right? And some of us, you have that. You have the happiness and you have the go-lucky and the positive and all these types of emotions that support that. And then you have these other emotions. So when you're training, how often have you guys seen somebody come in? It's their first time training. They have no experience. We start them through the process, and now we expose them to interpersonal human aggression and conflict just through role play. As we're doing it, so we're not just teaching them strategy, tactics, tools, conditioning, aligned familiarization, but now we start to expose them. You can, use direct body language at them that is aggressive or violent. You can direct, verbiage, interpersonal communication that has a certain tone to it. You can do all these things. You can exhibit behavior patterns, and guess what we see right away? What's revealed?
Their chronic behavior,
Emotion.
Their baseline emotion that they're going to feel.
Yes. Now, we're not saying this is all they're capable of feeling, but with one or two different stimulus, where we switch the stimulus of the threat, or 3 or 4 or 5, we start to see the same emotional thresholds, the same emotional range. Okay? And now you start helping them to identify, what emotions are you actually experiencing? To which most people go, what are you fucking talking about? They don't even, they get that they're feeling something, but they cannot identify it. Well, control can only ever will follow awareness, real control. So they have to become aware of the emotional state. So what happens, though, is, now I'll ask you this. Are all emotional states useful? Are they all like the right fuel for creating a doom on you mindset and being able to flip the switch and utilize violence of action to defend your life or the life of your family? Are they all good? Are they all equal?
No.
Mm-mm.
Okay, why would you say no?
There's some emotional states that I don't believe, even should they be regulated, right, that aren't really going to help you tap into violence, the doom on you, the destructive nature of violence to protect your family. It's like, yeah, in that moment, like, happiness isn't going to be an emotion that is going to work for me to be like, yeah, I'm going to be doom on you. Like, that's not going to be there.
Okay.
So there's some that, like, but again, like anger, yeah, part of it, but not a fucking driving force, a high level of anger. That's not going to serve you either, right?
Yeah, that's where I was going to go. Just as the opposite of happiness is anger, because I think, like, on first glance, people might think, well, no, if you're angry, of course you can use violence as a tool, and of course it's going to help you to overcome, whatever's in front of you. And it's like, yeah, but it's also probably the most likely emotion that's going to actually cause you to go too far and actually cause you to lose control. So even when you're trying to regulate it, if you're really delving into anger, I think you're going to have a really hard time controlling that. And now you're going to start to break out of your own moral code, potentially get into legal problems with what your actions are and that sort of thing. So I definitely don't think that's your best fuel for sure.
Okay. And same with fear.
Yeah.
on that. Like,
Yeah.
too much one way, too much the other way. I think, especially with fear, too much one way and too much the other way, you're still paralyzed.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I agree, but here's if we try to, I guess, simplify or put a narrow focus on this, there are emotions that I would say absolutely are not going to serve you. Okay, and the emotions that are not going to serve you, because all emotions, this is a bit of a generalization, but stick with me for a second. All emotions ultimately connect to a piece of our self-image, what we truly believe about ourselves. When you are in a situation where we face it and we have these negative emotions, like a tremendous amount of self-doubt, a feelingness of being unworthy or not enough, those emotions, I mean, we all have them at times, and we can all have them to varying degrees, and there can be anger and there can be all these other things in there. But we understand that if I have this uncertainty, and this uncertainty activates a negative part of my self-image that says you're not enough, you're not capable, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, you're not smart enough, you're not, look at this guy. If that happens, what you see, the cycle of the emotion being negative is it impacts your motivation because it impacts your expectation. And motivation is 80% expectation. So you can see a kid that was, bullied at his school really horribly for 3 years, and the parents go, fuck it, and they move countries. They don't just move towns, they move countries. And the kid starts in a new country, he speaks the language, everything like that. He starts in a new country, in a new school where nobody knows him. And he goes to school, and the parents are so excited for this fresh start, and within 2 weeks, he's being bullied. And they're like, how the fuck is this possible? Are all the kids in this world that mean? Are they that horrible? Are they all bullies? And yet what can happen is that this kid becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because he was so bullied, his sense of self, his self-image was so destroyed that he sees himself worthy of being the victim of bullying. He sees, I don't deserve any better. I am a fucking loser. Everything they've ever said about me, the way they treat me, is because of who I am and how I am. So they're right to do this. And so his motivation, he obviously has no motivation, but the expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So when it comes to having a doom on you mindset, you can have emotions that any emotion can be okay. It can be usable. But to me, we always get to the link of it and say, what's the emotion that you're experiencing and feeling right now? You could have somebody that says, I'm feeling a tremendous amount of fear and self-doubt. Right? And yet you can take it, and one of the most powerful things is you can look at that and say, how does that connect to your self-image? Tell me how you see yourself. Do you see yourself, does your life have value? Is your life more or less valuable than my life? Is your life more or less valuable than this guy's life or this person's life? And you'd be shocked. People would be shocked at what comes out of people's mouths. Or when people go, I don't know. And they say, well, no, my life, I get it'd be equal. And you say, you said it'd be equal, but you didn't say it. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. You have no conviction of belief in that. So no matter what I teach you, you're never going to pull the trigger for violence of action because you don't have a doom on you mindset. Because this person who thinks evil, who's bigger, stronger, fucking outgunning you, they're trying everything, they're cheating and trying everything in the book to fucking find a victim, to fuck you up. They don't give a shit. You have to have an equal conviction of fucking doom on you. My life has fucking infinitely more value than yours, who would try to take you get what I mean? So this connection between motivation, expectation to self-image, and then what has to happen and how do we do this is called the reframe. So what do we help somebody do? If they come in and they have an emotion where we go, listen, this emotion in and of itself is not bad. We're human beings. We experience things on an emotional level. So what emotion is bad? Well, I don't know if I would go as far to say that there are bad emotions, but there are emotions that fuel a negative self-image of ourselves. They then become legs under the table of our beliefs to support the fact that we're not worthy, we're not good enough, I don't deserve this, whatever the fuck it is. But those emotions in and of themselves can be reframed. You can destabilize, knock legs off those tables. You can provide new experiences. You can give them, that change their perceptions. And that's what training is, isn't it? Experiences that change your perceptions. You go, I've never done this before. Of course you've never done it before. But the point is you're doing it now, and here you are. And what type of man, what type of woman, what type of person would be doing these things? And look how, you can rebuild this. So we can reframe. So that's number one when it comes to the fuel, is the emotional system gets impacted, and we have to identify. Now, some people come in and the emotion that they have is fucking powerful. It's good. So you say like anger, but that anger is connected to a positive self-image. They're angry and indignant because they're like, who the fuck do you think you are to think you're better than me and can decide whether I live or die tonight, or the fact that you can threaten my family or take my property or whatever it is. So that anger, that fear of like, if I allowed you to do this, I'd lose my child. If I did nothing and sat here and you murdered me, I wouldn't go home to my kid. Do you know how that's going to change their life forever? That can be a fear that drives you into action, or it can be a fear that paralyzes you. So the reframe in this, and hopefully people are understanding that we have to get to the emotions. You want a doom on you mindset. It's not just an elbow. It's not an eye gouge. That's not what constitutes killer instinct. The doom on you mindset, the ability to flip the switch and actually execute violence of action in defense of your life when legally and morally justified, is so much deeper. So hopefully I'm starting to share with people, like they're going, oh fuck, there's a process to this shit? Yes. So we got to start to figure out what your baseline default emotional response is. Now, if it is like I said, the anger, and it's connected to more a positive self-image of like, fuck you, I have value, I'm not letting you do this to me. That is when we might say, okay, but we need to filter that through the regulator. You got the high octane fuel, but if we shoot that shit directly into the carbs, we're gonna get a fucking fire. We're gonna cross lines legally, morally, whatever. So we can put it through a fuel filter. We can put it through a carburetor or an injector system that helps us regulate, so we get the exact right amount of fuel. You need throttle, you hit the throttle and you get the response. You need less throttle, you can throttle back and you get that response. And so that now we start to go where, oh, that's a doom on you mindset. This shit is dialed in. This shit is surgical. Violence of action is not fucking eyes rolled back in the head, snot flying into your fucking nose, condition black, and you're killing and murdering everybody in your fucking path. That's condition black. That's catastrophic fucking fail. That's a meltdown. That's a nuclear power plant, all this power that melts down and destroys half the fucking world. That's not good. Okay, so when we're talking fuel the doom mindset, that is where we start first, is the emotional side of it. Now, the emotional side of it, as you start to regulate that, identify it, reframe it if need be, or regulate it, and typically we're doing both. It's a little bit of reframing, and it's a little bit of putting on the right regulator, getting the right thermostat, and you synergistically connect those two worlds. So now all of a sudden, somebody's out, and all of a sudden, somebody has the audacity, this violent criminal, to target them and their family. Well, now, because of this operant conditioning, this stimulus and conditioned response, stimulus, conditioned response, stimulus, conditioned response, guess where they go on default with no thought process? They have the right emotional state activate. Fast as you can blink, it just activates. And it is regulated because it's being filtered through the right system. And so they get right into this perfect fucking state, and this doom on you mindset begins to activate. And that is supported by the fact that they got the right type of conditioning because they've been doing the right type of training, and they have the line familiarization. They're like, here, I got news for you. I've seen this show before. I've read this fucking book before. I've studied the blueprints. I know your playbook. So there is no shock and awe on your part. You lost surprise. Yes, you might have more people, you might have weapons, you might have this, but I am not unprepared for those things. I foresaw those things because I studied your blueprint. So now hopefully we can see where that part is online now. But there is still yet another part, because even as we regulate these emotions inside of us and we filter and regulate and we've reframed and it's connected to positive self-image and all this stuff, it is all inside of us still. We have to take that fuel, and that fuel has to actually get to the engine, and then that power has to get from the engine to the fucking tires so we get traction. So how do we take what is inside of us, and how do we direct that and manifest that into the physical world and through our strategies so that we can execute on the violence of action? What's the next step after the emotional regulation?
You start to condition the responses that you want to go along with that. It's like, well, what is it fueling? Some sort of a motor program. right?
Okay, so that's the strategy tactic. That's the physical part. So we're already conditioning the conditioning for it. You're doing the strategy, doing the tactics. We could spend more time talking about that because it's obviously part. But we're doing all the physical training. I don't want to get into the details because it's the minutia right now. But what is the next step off the deeper work that has to happen? The emotional system is impacted first. The emotional system has now been regulated. We've shared the framework with how we're doing that and the importance of why, I hope. What's the next step?
What we said earlier about a reframe. So you need to, when you have that emotional response and it's been regulated, it's like, well, now what are we focusing on? What are we replacing it with? What are we going to give the emotional system, the mental system? What are we going to feed into it? Okay, I'm scared. I'm experiencing fear. Okay, well, this is a natural response to combat stress, to a threat that's in front of me. But by just zeroing in even on the regulated fear, it's not going to get me to this level of performance in defending my life without replacing that with even like a tactical self-talk, something like that. Or even, I lost my thought,
Well, you're on it. So let's actually stop there.
mission commands.
Yeah, mission commands. Because
Yeah.
the next step, when you have the emotions regulated, right, now it's regulated. It's been reframed. It's done. Well, the emotional system is hit first. What's the second hit system that's hit?
Our intellectual system.
The psychology.
Psychology.
So the emotions, the feeling becomes a thought. So if the feeling becomes a thought, now it left uneducated, untrained. How do you have a doom on you mindset? How do you throttle into violence of action in the right surgical way, right? Because we don't want to melt down like a nuclear plant and destroy half the world when we're not legally or morally justified in doing that. Otherwise, you're gonna implode your own family and your own life and end up in prison or whatever the fuck. So the whole idea is that once the emotional system's hit and we've regulated that, a thought becomes an emotion. So if unregulated, that emotion becomes a thought. So if the emotion's unchecked and it's like going up to critical mass where it's a meltdown, your thought is, I don't give a fuck. I'll kill you fucking all. You fucking come at me. And now you're slicing fucking throats and you're killing people and you're biting people and you're gouging people and you're bottling people. And at the end of it, you say, someone's like, fuck you. You took down 3 people that had nothing to fucking do with that. You're just in fucking nuclear meltdown. You're conditioned black. But you get what I mean? That emotion became a thought. I don't give a fuck. I don't care. I don't care about anything. I don't care about right, wrong. You just became like them. But if we say, no, we've regulated that through the training, you're weaponizing that system. So now we're saying we're impacting our motivation and expectation and reframing it and throttling it through the thermostat. So now we're not melting down. We are tactical. We are surgical in what we're doing. So that fuel, though, has to go somewhere. So it has to become a thought. So now how you build this out, and again, I'm just going to retie this into it. We were training, and he said to me, oh, you're just doing your breathing naturally. But he's hearing how I'm breathing. And I'm breathing with intensity. I'm breathing. What he's hearing, what he's feeling, what he's experiencing is the doom on you mindset. And I am training and simulating and he's feeling the violence of action in every single thing I do. But I'm trying, and then I had to back up and say, listen, this started with emotional awareness and regulating my emotional system. The second I had that and I could identify the emotions that I'm feeling, what my baseline and default are they good or are they not, and I regulate that, I had to take those emotions and I had to attach them to a what? Tactical self-talk. I had to take them, your feeling's going to become a thought. Well, what's the word that comes to your head? If you go, oh, I regulate all my emotions and everything else, I'm good. Now all of a sudden you find yourself in a violent assault. You regulate these emotions, but everything's happening so fast. What thought is in your head? What's the word? What's the word? What's the image? What's the symbol that's coming to your mind? Oh, I don't know. Could that be problematic?
Yeah.
Yeah, because then you're just letting things happen. You haven't created anything.
Yeah, you can lose control over the emotion. Because you have nothing in your mind. Remember, metacognition, right? I'm not trying to get fancy with these big terms. Metacognition just means as human beings, we have the ability to become aware of what we're thinking of. And most people have heard of a phrase called stinking thinking. So you can regulate your emotions all day long and you can get this thing checked. So you're off to a great start. But the emotion, the feeling becomes a thought. And if you haven't strengthened the link, so the feeling becomes a thought, but you haven't strengthened that thought. You have put no time or energy into how much juice do I get from that thought, from that word, from that phrase, from that mantra. And if you don't know what that is and you haven't built that in, then another thought, another word, another image can creep into your psychology, and it can go back down the pipe and blow the fuck up out of your emotions. Just understand how the human system works. It's very simple. Emotions to thoughts to actions. Those impact your actions. So what I'm saying is that when we get people identify the emotion, connected to the positive self-image, all that kind of stuff that we talked about, then I say, listen, now what you got to do when you have that, when you're executing this strategy, this tactic, this tool, whatever, what word is in direct alignment and even better, synergistic to the feelings that you want to have? I now have the emotional octane. I have the right fuel. Give me, what word would you use to describe that gives you that feeling that, that, so some people it's like, no. Like, no is a complete fucking sentence. No, period. I say fucking no, fuck you, minute. Fuck, no. That no has an emotional, like, if I say this is the emotion I need to feel at this moment in time in a situation, right? It might change in a few seconds, but at this moment in time, no is directly synergistically connected to the state that I need to be in to perform the violence of action, to have the doom on you mindset. If it's, I got something for you, come on. Whatever, there's so many phrases, that's going to be situational. I'm just using no as an example, so hopefully people can roll with me on this and understand this. But when I have that word, guess what I can start doing now? I set my emotional state viscerally, stimulus, boom, emotional response. I'm dialed in, I'm surgical, I'm tactical. But more than that, this word pops into my head, no. Come on. You know what I mean? I got something for you. Whatever that word, that small phrase, that mantra is, that now is locked into my mindset. And that word is being repeated quickly and probably quietly. I'm probably doing it subconsciously because I've used classical and operant conditioning to viscerally impart this in my system. I'm building out a survival system, something to use under crisis so I don't have to fucking think. But now that word is being repeated. It is locked in the theater of my mind. My self-talk, my subconscious, my inner dialogue is on the mic going, no. That word, that repeated metacognition being, is reinforcing and anchoring and locking my emotional state in, which is going to impact the physiology, obviously, right? You get what I mean? To me, it's like you're in a current, a real strong fucking current. I'm in a boat, and I'm dropping anchor right fucking here. So I can shut the boat off, but if that's all I do is shut the boat off, the current's going to take me eventually. But if I can drop out some anchors, and those anchors root deep, I can withstand a tremendous amount of force. I can stay there. So the emotional system is regulated, the psychology, the mindset through tactical self-talk. And I don't know if a lot of people fully understand the power of self-talk. Now, they might think of self-talk as something you do when you wake up in the morning or before you start the day or periodically through your day. If you don't think that self-talk is happening to you when you're in the most deadly life and death situation in your life, you are fucked. It is happening, man. And if you've never been trained to regulate if you don't have tactical self-talk, right? Step up.
Negative.
Self-talk under pressure, right? That is, SEAL team, special operations group, that is the shit. Step up. Self-talk under pressure. Okay, right? That's the stuff that works. Okay, so you guys can jump in and reinforce a bit here on this if you want to share your...
I was just going to say, on the self-talk thing, it's like, if it's not purposeful, it isn't positive.
Yeah.
almost guaranteed. If you're not choosing what to be thinking about, and again, like you said, it becomes subconscious, but on the front end, when you're putting the work in the training side of it, if you're not choosing what to put in there, what your self-talk is going to be for each part of like the strategies and all of that stuff, like you said, it depends on the moment and situation. That self-talk changes a little bit, but if you don't program it, it's not going to come out positively. It's going to be the most negative, toxic, just like violence, toxic, septic, corrosive. That's what your self-talk will be. If you're going to just wing it, that's going to be a tough day.
Yeah. I'll just say one thing, and then Brad, feel free to jump in. But I like the word that you use, the word programming, Dustin. You get a. I mean, oh fuck, I'm going to date myself. You get a new VCR, and the hardest part was programming the motherfucker.
Oh.
That's where everyone struggled, right? The VCR didn't just plug into the wall and record whatever the fuck you wanted to it record, no matter how much you yelled at it. It didn't do it. Nowadays, I'm sure there's a whole bunch of things you just talk to, but you had to program the fucking thing. And that's the self-talk. You got to program it. Brad, why don't you throw your 2 cents downrange?
Yeah, you know what? Just to jump off of where Dustin left was something came to my mind, and it's like, if you don't use it, you lose it. And it's just like anything else. Like if you, like we've talked, you gotta program your self-talk. You got to condition it. You got to work it. It's got to be by design and on fucking purpose. Now that's all fine and dandy, but if you're like, yeah, I did that, and like I'm good, it's like, no, motherfucker, you're not. That needs to be something that you're constantly honing in, constantly developing, and because if you don't use it, you lose it. So in everything that you're doing, you have to be attaching that tactical self-talk to it. It's got to be, it's got to give you the fuel. It's got to give you the juice. And it's like, it could change and it could evolve, but that is again, by design. And it's like, you have to constantly keep doing it. It's like going to the gym and doing squats. And you're like, no, I've done lots of squats. Like, I think my legs are good now. I'm just going to work upper body. It's like, no, you still got to do squats. You still got to do those things. You still got to continue to build the tools that you live and die by.
Yeah. It's so imperative. And one of the things is it's also so very easy because we're always like, because we understand the connection and we're always working the process because the process works. Every time that you're training, every time you're moving, throwing an elbow, doing a smash and grab, doing a flashbang, whatever it is, we're always, okay, emotional state set. What's the tactical self-talk that you're using? So you're always revisiting this system. You're always reinforcing the system. And then it just becomes subconscious. It's built into a neuro-associated response. So there's a stimulus and there's a response, and you bypass the need to formulate the thoughts, which in crisis time you don't have. You got to shorten the reaction model. So it's the stimulus, you perceive it, you analyze it, evaluate it. That's all happening viscerally. You don't need to formulate. You go straight to download, go straight to action. Okay, so we've got the emotional set, we've done the reframing, we've linked it to the positive self-image, we've regulated it, and then we've reinforced it by anchoring it with some tactical self-talk. So words have juice, people. There's a word, a phrase, or something you say to yourself that fucking fires you up. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. That helps reinforce the state. We've synergistically built those things together by design. Now, I said that it helps when you anchor things. Well, if we're in a life and death situation and you're like, oh, so I'm supposed to be saying this word over and over again, but isn't there all this shit going on? No, if you've conditioned it right, it's happening automatically. Self-talk happens subconsciously for us. It's part of, it happens. It is always going on. You're just not always aware of it. But self-talk is always happening. It's how the mind works. But even better to anchor it, because our whole idea is to take what is inside and manifest it outside. So how do we got this emotion and we've got this fucking self-talk. So we've got this regulator, we got this octane fuel, and it's almost getting to the point that we're getting that power to the tires to get traction. But here's the next step, and this helps with a lot of other things that we can go into, but you then work on taking what you're feeling and what you're thinking and manifesting or expressing it through breath. So instead of saying the word, and I'm just using the word no for an example because it's very simple, very short. But in my mind, I'm like, no, not like no, meaning not fucking today. No, as in like you're not going to take my fucking life. No, I have fucking value. I value more and tolerate less. Fucking no. Like, so this no has all of this deep-rooted meaning to it. So you're in your head, it's like no. And you might find yourself fucking no. Like no, you're saying it because you're trying to express. You got to let this out. So as you're elbowing somebody, as you're driving into somebody, as you're gouging somebody, it's like, fuck no. But you're like, well, I don't want to be, my mouth open that big, my jaws open as I'm talking, you might get hit and crack. But what you also want to be able to do is to breathe and regulate, just overall physiology. So we work on then converting your word to breath. So somebody that says, just again, our easy example, no. No goes from no to no, 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 no. And then all of a sudden, that no, and it almost becomes, in our world, it almost becomes a bark. Like a dog barking, there's a different inflection to a bark. And that breath in and that is that short, diaphragmatic, powerful breathing. Now, depends if we're in an anaerobic part of close quarter combat or we're out aerobic, your breath is going to change. So you're going to have short, powerful, diaphragmatic breathing, and you're also going to have longer, deeper diaphragmatic breathing to oxygenate the blood. So you're going to have different, but again, we're working the ozones, or we're working the different states when it's appropriate, like obviously in different ranges, all that type of stuff. But I want people to understand that all of a sudden, you have this breath that comes out of you. And people say, breathing's fucking easy. I do it all day. That's how I'm still living. I don't even have to think about it. There's a difference between breathing and breath. And everybody that studied yoga or swims or does anything has learned the very best in the world. You got to fucking control breath. You got to design breath. It's strategical. It's tactical. And I wanted people to understand this course. So now you're seeing this triangle. Control and regulate the emotions and reframe and manage expectations and attach to self-image and self-belief. And now you've got this fuel, but that fuel is not transferred yet. Then that becomes the thought. So you anchor it in with good tactical self-talk. Then all of a sudden you take it from the tactical self-talk, and then that translates through your breath. And now your breath is what is expressing into the physical plane. And so when you move, when a sprinter sprints, when a jumper jumps, when a football player tackles or a rugby player runs or whatever the fuck it is, they are breathing in connection with what they're thinking, in connection with what they're feeling in the moments. And when they're doing it well, they're in what is called flow state, or what we call the optimal zone of natural excellence. You're in the peak state for life and death confrontation. When those triangle, that trifecta, is connected together, now somebody looks at you and says, oh yeah, that breathing's kind of neat. You're doing it just naturally. And it's like, there ain't fucking nothing natural with what I'm doing right now, motherfucker. This is by design. And I revisit this and I check in and make sure that I'm having the emotional states that I want or that I need, that best serve me, that are most strategic and tactical, that allow me to maximize my violence of action. I am constantly checking in and making sure that the words that I'm using, my tactical self-talk, is still giving me the fucking juice it did, because they do change. Brad said that. It changes. So I'm always checking in with that, and then I'm always building and connecting and controlling my breath. So your breath is surgical, it's tactical, it's directly connected to violence of action, and guess what all of a sudden you have? We haven't talked about the specifics of the strategies or the tactics or the tools that we're using. And yet I think anyone at this point, if you've sat with us and done this deep dive and have followed along with us, and we've done a decent job of painting the picture, I think you see that this leaves you no other choice but to have and embody and utilize a doom on you mindset. This is how you get there. It's not just going, fuck it, somebody fucks with me and I'll fuck him up. It's not from your ego. Because maybe that works for you once or twice. Hell, maybe that works for you 20 or 30 times. But when you get outgunned, outmanned, outclassed, when you're in a position where you are most vulnerable, not most dominant, meaning you're with your young children, not your 10 buddies, when you get 50 instead of 20, when you don't have, 60-inch fucking neck and all the other bullshit and the steroids stop and everything else, when you got a bum knee and sore neck and everything else, you better have trained to have the doom on you mindset. The mind-body connection needs to be understood and it needs to be trained. Is there anything that you guys... there's one more piece of this that is so important. It's right at an hour. I'll throw it this way and you guys can power down on this if you want. But when we do the emotions and then we do the self-talk, between the self-talk and the breathing, one of the most important extra layers of cement that I put on top of that, like the extra big anchor that I'd throw into the water so that I can withstand the strong currents pushing against me, is called cue imaging. There's tactical arousal control techniques, but real short, cue imaging is when they think of a word that synergistically connects to what they're feeling and the emotion, I now ask them to think of an image that best represents that. So you could have somebody that says no, right? Like no, and say, this is the line in the sand. I won't tolerate this. I'm not fucking mad. I'm fucking indignant at this point. But it's no, you will not to be taking my, so there's no. So I'd say, okay, well, drawing a picture of a line in the sand, that's cue imaging because you're seeing this line in the sand, but it's not really powerful, right? So say, okay, now when you say no, you might start imaging yourself like when you say no, fucking the Iron Man suit, and not just any Iron Man suit starts to activate and encase your body, the fucking Hulkbuster. Like all of a sudden that monstrosity, just fucking like that kind of no, like that kind of armor comes up, that kind of like fucking firepower. So now your word no has a symbol. You know what? Like you look at Batman, and Batman's whole thing was the symbol. And it was designed to strike fear. They could turn on the bat signal and criminals would see it, and they would feel something that would change their behavior. And I don't want to go into this too deep, but you need to do, it would benefit a lot of people to do some research on the power that symbols have on human beings. Our mind works by thinking in terms of symbols, not letters and words. So tactical self-talk, words are powerful. Symbols are 100x. And so when you get the word, when you get the emotion, and you get the right word that makes you feel that emotion, and then you get the symbol, is like adding jet fuel to that bonfire. Like it is fucking powerful. And maybe my last example when you guys jump in it is you're driving in your car, you're in the worst mood you've ever been in your life, and one of your favorite all-time songs comes on the radio, and all of a sudden you feel a state change. Why? Because you hear something. And I guarantee when you hear that song, a symbol, an image flashes on the theater of your mind, and it takes you back to one of the greatest memories that you've ever experienced. But the memory isn't about a word. It isn't about the letters that make up the word. It's this, you'll have a Kodak moment, like an old Kodak Polaroid. There'll be a symbol, and that symbol will forever remind you of this. That's the power of cue imaging done well. Okay, so this is how we build out the Doom on You mindset and how we prepare people to be able to actually throttle on, like with a light switch control. Turn it on, turn it off, violence of action. So I don't know, guys, anything on that? Anything that this is a deep subject, and, I don't even know how we did it in an hour or if we did it well enough in an hour, but we gave it the old college try.
You know what? I'm gonna try to be as quick as I can because I know that we're coming up to the hour, but I can't have this conversation and not share the story because for me, this is one of the biggest aha moments in my journey where like I still think about it. I still remember where I learned to breathe, and I remember exactly what we were doing working the avalanche strategy, and you know what? We went through this whole process. We dialed it in, but on that day, in that time that I was doing it, there was still this. I wasn't able to connect it, and I wasn't able. And and I remember you're like, well, dude, you got to breathe, and I'm like, I'm fucking breathing, and I remember it was kind of this back and forth. I'm like, I'm breathing, like I don't get like, but it was like, yes, I was breathing, like with exertion and stuff like that, like you are when you're being physical, but I wasn't connected to the breath, and it was like it took me a couple of evolutions of going through we were working the process. And then there was a round and a time where I'm just like working that breath, and I could feel the emotional connection to the breath, not just the physical act of me breathing. It was the emotional connection of what I was thinking in here, and that was able to manifest through that breath. And once I had one breath, my body and my mind and everything was like, yeah, that was it. Yeah. And then I had that new baseline. And for me, like, it was such an aha moment, and I've never done it differently. Like, it's just like, that's how I breathe, because it just gave me so much fuel with it. But yeah, man,
I'm glad you shared that, because before that, and it's like a flood open. It's like a dam opens up and the water comes it's like a tsunami hits you. Because you had the emotions, you had the self-talk, and you're like, I am doing this, Greg. And it's like, no, you're just breathing, not using breath. And I know exactly what you're talking about, because the second that you allow, because here's what I've seen. We are self-conscious. It feels awkward to us to let out, like scream therapy in a way, right? But the second that happened, that floodgate opened, like you said, it's undeniable and you can never go back, right?
You
Like
know what? And even reflecting back, like it is almost an emotional experience.
Yeah.
Because like as especially as men, I think that we are socially conditioned to not express our emotions and not have be okay with manifesting those out into the real world. And I remember that aha moment was like it was draining, because it was like almost like all this time training and all this tough like working and trying to put like what's in here. It was like you open the tap, not even just the tap, like the fucking floodgates open, because you're like, oh, here's all the emotions that I've been trying to connect with over the last however many years, and now I was able to actually be able to what's in here, what I'm focusing on here, manifest through the breath in the real world. And it was
It's powerful.
I had to share that because
No, it's great. I'm glad you did.
I always do when we talk about this.
Yeah. Yep. Dustin, any?
Just a really quick story, since Brad's was so long-winded. No, just because when you got talking about Q imaging, and just an example of, another way to kind of apply the Q imaging, because it just happened last Friday. My son's been working his way through the Be Your Own Protector program, and so he's working the flashbang protocol, specifically eye shots. And because we talked about breath and taking the psychological self-talk and turning it into breath as an expression, and in that protocol, that was something you're requiring people to do. And I could tell he was having trouble with it, and it's because it's awkward. When people aren't used to using their breath, they find it awkward, especially when someone is standing right there watching them, which I was doing because I was helping coach him as he's working through it. And so I pulled from Q imaging in that, and I was like, well, what are you doing? Like, it's an eye shot, right? So for people who don't know, it's like a very whip-like snapping motion, into someone's eyes. And so I'm explaining it to him. I'm like, well, you're having trouble breathing. And I'm like, so use the word. I'm like, when you do the eye shot, I'm like, I want you to say snap, but not snap, snap, snap. I'm like, say snap like a snap. Like, picture a mouse trap snapping shut. I'm like, bang. You know what I mean? It's not just close. I'm like, snap. So I got him saying it like that as he's throwing his eye shot, and all of a sudden the expression starts to come out. And now I'm like, now just turn that snap into the like to the breath, like that you're talking about, like that little bark. Yeah, just exactly. And so, you know what I mean? Like, and just so it's so interesting to be able to have that and be able to be like, here, do this, turn it to this, turn it to that, turn to this. Perfect. Next. Do you know what I mean? So just, again, just the power of just the whole process that we just kind of went through for people. But, it's so easy to apply. I mean, he's 13 years old, and in 20 seconds, it's like you see a big improvement in what he's trying to do physically, but it had nothing to do with the physical.
And see, what's so great about that, and I'm so glad that you shared that, is because that's it. As much as we're trying to break this down, I'm trying to teach people a framework, because these people might never come to me, and that's fine. So you're on your own. Use this. So we're going very deep. But what you did was like, I don't need them to understand all of the ins and outs of this. I'm just going to apply it to them. And that's how fast. What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Emotional state? What's the self-talk? Give us a word. Add some Q imaging. Anchor it through breath. And in a matter of a few minutes, he is literally, you're like, okay, I just noticed a 60%, 80%, whatever it is. You can see 100%, not saying they're perfect, but you say, from what you were doing to what you're doing now you're in the ballpark. That's 100% improvement. Yeah. Now from there, we can start to level that up, right? But it is that powerful. And the best part is that when he's doing that snap, and then it becomes snap, you're like, oh, look you're doing it with some fuck you in there. Controlled, surgical, tactical, doom on you, violence of action. So and then of course you back up and you link that to a threat cue. So how do I know when to activate this, Dad? Because there's the threat cue, stimulus response. When legally and morally justified, recognized body language, behavior, communication. We're reading this, we're teaching the pins. It's a green light. What do you like? You teach your son how to drive. What happens when the light turns green, Dad? Well, you look both ways, cautious, but you go. You put your foot on the gas. Oh. So what happens when you see this threat cue? Well, it's a green light. If we can't remove the escalator deterrent, you put your foot on the fucking gas and you defend yourself, son. Oh, and then it's all there. So that's the process, man. And anybody can do it. You know, it's nice when you have a coach who understands the process, who guides you through it. Because if you have questions, you ask. But that's it. We just shared it. Like, it's not rocket science. It's just a process. But, you know, you don't know the process till you know the fucking process. Right? And you can take that process and apply it to many different things in life, not just violence. How do you respond in stress? How do you, like, just life stress, the FOOP, the fear, the uncertainty, the chaos, and erraticness of life? So anyways, yeah, both great stories to end with, guys, because that really hopefully solidified it for people, if they're still with us, which I hope they are. But, okay, we'll put a pin in it here, guys. Great conversation. It's a little deeper than what I normally like to try to go with people. But listen, we're doing this, we're documenting. That's it. I'm documenting the journey because this process of how you weaponize it's not available on every street corner. Simply because it's some sort of fucking secret, because most of the world is caught up right now in sport and competition and emulating what they see on TSN and TikTok and, you know, so what they know about martial arts and stuff. But there are many good people, men that take the role and the responsibility of protecting their families very, very seriously. And they're just unaware of an alternative to, I don't care about the cage and belts, and I just want to learn to protect my family. I don't have a ton of time. I'm not going to be able to train like a pro fighter. And I don't, you know, I'm not the biggest, strongest guy. Okay, then there's a different approach. Violence demands a different approach from the get-go anyhow. And we're trying to just document and share the process. So I hope that you've gotten some value out of this. Okay, so having said that, everybody, that's it. We're going to end it here tonight. Dustin, Brad, thank you guys so much again for sharing your knowledge, information, and experience. You do it all for free, donation of time. And time is a gift you never get back. So thank you guys. Thank everybody who's listening. We are definitely seeing a big increase in our followers and downloads, and that is because of one thing and one thing only. That is because more and more people are listening, sharing, liking, commenting, giving us feedback, and most importantly, you're giving us a rating. You're going there wherever you download your podcast. You're taking the time to leave a quick comment and a rating. Hopefully, and most of them, a lot of them, 5-star ratings. And so I deeply appreciate that, because that's how more people find us. And the more people that find us, we're growing this organically. Our whole mission is to weaponize the world, make everybody that much safer. Evil prevails when good men do nothing. And this is our effort to make sure that good men are armed and can meet or respond to the call in those dark, critical moments. So that is it, everybody. Until next time, stay safe, stay weaponized. We're going to chat again soon, everybody. Thank you.